live and online. It's Sleepless with Steve and the Movie Book Club with your host, Steve Pulaski.
Back and better than ever, Sleepless with Steve, live on YouTube on this Wednesday evening. Steve Pulaski behind the microphone in an unusually bright shirt. Shout out to my godfather for supplying me with these like shirts you can see from space. I got like 6 of these, FYI. So you're going to be seeing a lot of yellow in the wardrobe coming up. If for no other reason than these shirts are comfortable. Who really gives a damn? I'm Steve Pulaski, Joe Viso on the theater screen, Dominic Guanzon in the blue polo. We have got a full show. You could take a month-long excursion to China, come back to the United States, and still not have as much to unpack as we do tonight on this show. This is the biggest show in quite a while. One topic that is terrible, truthfully, that we have to touch on because it's exploded over social media the last 7 days. You can't log on the internet without reading about it. We'll break down all that, dispel some misinformation with the best of our abilities. I got 2 great gentlemen over here who I know have done their research on top of myself. We've got that, and then the rest of the show is about Dune and the box office haul of Dune, which it was funny because the crux of the conversation about the box office as we planned it last week was going to be, was the opening weekend strong enough to get a sequel? Well, we already got our answer on that. Yeah. But it's still fun to bloviate about the numbers and such.
As I texted the group chat, I was like, we literally got a complete story about Dune's box office and if it will get a sequel before we actually had Dune 2.
Like, honestly, wouldn't it be sweet? You know what I thought about? Wouldn't it be sweet if like Dune Part 2 was and has been in the can and it drops in December or January?
That would blow people's minds. Like if like they did, because I remember like the Matrix sequels did that, where it was like, oh yeah, Matrix, whatever the second one was called, is coming out in the summer, and then like after it came out during the summer, people were like, well, when's the next one coming out? Actually, at the end of the year in December. It was just like, what?
You would lose so much money though.
Yeah.
From the box office overlap, you would lose so much money.
You would. And these are movies too where it's already like, this doesn't get brought up a ton, but like, you know, I mean, for a lot of these movies, these longer movies, they're usually big budget movies, so they usually make a lot of money to begin with. But you got to think too, when a movie's 2.5 hours long, that a theater's got to have like 3 hours and 20 minutes reserved for that screening alone, coupled with the trailers and the stupid Nuvi advertisements and Maria Menounos and her shindig.
I was gonna say, don't be hating on my girl Maria Menounos, man.
I love Maria Menounos. Maria Menounos. I just wish she would do something better. But I wish she'd get a talk show already. But like, you know, they have to reserve like 3.5 hours for a theater like that. You know, so that takes away from showtimes, obviously, too. And, I mean, we have quite a bit out, too, at the moment with No Time to Die, Addams Family 2, Halloween Kills, and so on and so forth. But anyway, before we go any further, Dominic, how are you?
I am doing all right. It's been a fast-moving, very fast-moving October. It's already Halloween. It's already the end of the month. And, yeah, dude, there's a lot set in motion. A lot of people want to close out the year, but it seems like everyone wants to do it at the same time. So nice. It's a lot of juggling.
Giuseppe, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing great. I'm very looking forward to talking about Dune, and I want to get started right away. So let's. That's all I'm going to leave it at. This is the review I've been looking forward to the most ever since I finished reading the book.
Let's dive. Oh, really? That's right. Yeah. So he brings. I almost forgot. You bring the perspective of the book too.
Yeah.
Which is going to be very interesting. We'll definitely learn me some things. I can only imagine. But we got to touch on this topic. We're going to lead with this because you can't escape it. It's all over social media. It's all over the 24-hour news cycle. It's sad as hell. It's a tragic event. It kept me up like an hour and a half after my bedtime last Wednesday, too, reading about it. This is devastating. Like I said, I want to preface by saying that, too, because you know, I'm sick of the hashtag. I'm sick of the social media lynch mob with this thing. And it makes you wonder, like with some of these past events, like one we'll get into, a big one, you know, what social media would have done for better or for worse, probably for worse, had it happened in 2021, not 1994. But anyway, if you're living under a rock, you know that on the set of unless you live under a rock, you know that on the set of an upcoming movie called Rust, starring Alec Baldwin, cinematographer Helena Hutchins was fatally shot after Baldwin discharged a gun used as a prop on set. It also injured the director, Joel Souza. The gun was handed to him by assistant director Dave Halls. That information came out today. That information is brand new about Dave Halls. Now, here's what we know. I just want to get into what we know before we get into kind of like pontificating about this whole thing, because it's still touchy. It's still a very fresh thing that you're going to have to wait for the investigation to fully disclose. But what we do know is that the production's armorer, the lead armorer on the set, was a 24-year-old woman named Hannah Gutierrez Reed. This was only her second film as a lead armorer. And also the aforementioned assistant director, Dave Halls, reports indicate that he had been fired from working on another film after a firearm unexpectedly discharged and wounded a crew member. Compounding this whole mess, too, is the IATSE strike debacle, which we've touched about the last 3 weeks on the show. And I think Dom said it best, too, in the group chat the day of. It was only a matter of time before this was going to find its way into this whole thing.
Yeah.
And honestly, too, this is partly why IATSE wanted to strike in the first place in some ways. Because, crew members with the strike, and now that they've reached a deal with the American Motion Picture Alliance and stuff, it's kind of faded from the news cycle. But compounding this mess, though, is the IATSE strike and crew members complaining about working conditions, low pay, long hours. That was the exact problem on the set of this Rust movie, too. Missed payments, retracting hotels, lack of COVID protocols, and even improper gun safety as well. 7 unionized members walked off the set of this movie and were replaced with non-union members. And immediately, too, looking at this, again, I'll say it again, this is partly why IATSE wanted to strike. Now, they couldn't have envisioned something like this, mind you. But at the same time, though, it goes to show you the repercussions of such things, too. This was a tight movie schedule. This was day 12 of a 21-day shoot, if I'm not mistaken. And so you have a super tight schedule. You have people overworked, already in a bad mood because they're not getting paid, a lot of the background people at least. It's a strenuous time. You're in the middle of the Albuquerque desert, for God's sake. You know what I mean? You're in the middle of New Mexico desert. I have no idea what the conditions are, but it can't be desirable. There's a reason it's a desert. And immediately, too, the second I saw this headline, my mind went to the famous and still saddening death of Brandon Lee, Bruce Lee's son, in 1994 on the set of the movie The Crow. Now, I encourage you, if you do not know the story of that, to look that up and at least read the Wikipedia breakdown of it, because let me tell you, that story, I watched The Crow a couple Halloweens ago, truthfully, and reviewed it. It's a very good movie. But man, is it sad to read that whole thing. Michael Massey was the one who fired the gun. He didn't act for 2.5 years after that. He became an alcoholic afterwards and such. He suffered incredible stress. And I think the only relief for Massey at the end of the day was that Michael Massey is not a household name. He's a That Guy actor, was a That Guy actor. He passed away. He was a That Guy actor. Alec Baldwin is a household name. That's another reason this story's not going away anytime soon. And lastly, too, before I turn it over to these guys to offer some more insight, this isn't the first time this has happened, clearly, with the Brandon Lee situation, which is arguably the most famous up until this one. You had in 1984, John Eric Hexum, who took a self-inflicted blank cartridge to the head and died in an episode of the CBS show, the short-lived CBS show, Cover Up. And then you also had, before that, an extra was shot with a live round and killed on the Cecil B. DeMille film, The Captive, in 1915. So this is not an unheard of occurrence, sad as it is to say, but it is a devastating occurrence. And I get real sickened by the social media outrage of this whole thing. I get sick of the hashtag Alec for prison Alec Baldwin murder nonsense. And I think the social media echo chamber, too, has worsened this thing before we can even get a clear-cut investigative report on what actually happened. Joe's chomping at the bit. I'm going to throw it over to you.
Yeah, no, I'm going to start with the social media thing, and then I'll also go into my own perspective about the whole thing. But over the weekend, I mean, like, you either saw two types of things. You either saw people making memes about this up the ass, like, all over throughout social media. That it got old very quick. I mean, I wasn't even laughing in the first place about them, but then like just seeing them over and over again, I was like, all right, guys, like, I mean, the person literally died and everything. This is pretty messed up. I don't know, maybe it's because we've been like talking about the IATSE like strike and everything that, like, you know, I just kind of had a different view of this, probably compared to most people. So when I started seeing memes about it, I just was kind of like not disgusted by it, but turned off. The second thing is, yeah, the social media outcry to put Alec Baldwin in prison, or like, you know, people like even saying like, you know, like he should be like given like life sentence and everything. It's like the guy didn't mean to do it. No one intended anybody on set for this to happen. And I've been on Twitter too. I mean, this is of course the guy I always like love to see his reactions to stuff, but James Gunn on Twitter was just shooting down every idiot that was like claiming all this stuff. First off, he actually brought up a really good point too. The people that the crew, when the crew left and the movie replaced them with these non-union members, they were actually shooting the guns used for this movie at like beer bottles, cans, and all that before they actually started shooting the scene that they were going to use those same guns for. And James Gunn brought up that like this is like a very important thing. You shouldn't do this before like any like shooting the day of.
At this time, that is an unconfirmed report, but it has surfaced.
Yeah.
It has been surfaced. It's unconfirmed yet, but it has surfaced, and it adds another interesting layer to this whole mess.
Yeah, and like he goes on. If you go on James Gunn's Twitter, I mean, like, he tweets every day, so like you're gonna be scrolling through like so much. But once you get to October 25th, where like this incident was really starting to like take off, and like news about it was getting around to everybody, you can find a lot of tweets of his really talking about when it comes to safety on like sets and everything. And Dom's gonna go further into that as well. But like he brings up how like, you know, why don't like, you know, like all the other like set issues that people have. It's just like he brings up how like, you know, just because like we take a precaution with a firearm doesn't mean it won't stop 99% of the deaths or injuries that happen on a set. Like there's other things too. He brings up how that person on the last Resident Evil movie that came out died because of a failed stunt involving like a motorcycle flipping over or like a bridge collapse. There's like a lot of things that can happen when like you don't have like, you know, the proper people working on a film, or even just being, you know, properly given like enough time to rest and paid and all this other stuff between movies and everything. Like, you know, that's probably what leads into some of those accidents as well, is that people don't get enough rest. People like, you know, are just like, you know, scrambling around trying to get a shot done or scene done, and stuff like this can happen. It was actually really cool to see somebody in the business, as big of a director as James Gunn is, really like offer his insight. And he does that with every topic when it comes to Hollywood, but like again, he's like the guy I always love to see his like opinion on stuff when it comes to this. Dom, what do you gotta say?
There is a quote I remember from the movie Zero Dark 30. And that quote is, "Protocol only works when you do it every time." And that quote really stuck with me when I first saw it. Because spoiler, they didn't follow protocol and bad things happened in that movie as a result. But it really is the truth. You know, we laugh at the massive rule books and rules and regulations for OSHA requirements. You know, if it's do every little thing, you got to do this, that they recommend you're doing this, and this. And, you know, I'm sure every workplace that everyone has worked at some point has violated an OSHA rule. And, you know, we joke about that stuff and do whatever. But I would hope in the back of everyone's mind is that there's a freaking reason why they're there, right? When this story first popped up, as soon as it broke, we messaged each other in the group chat, the three of us, and we were like, this can only happen. This worst case scenario can only happen if there is a culture that allows it to happen. Either there's a possibility that maybe the person, you know, maybe everything was airtight, everyone was following regulation, following rules, tip-top shape, and then for whatever reason right before, maybe someone you just had a lapse of memory, and then what happens.
But even then, like, if I may, like, even then, it's like there wouldn't be so much speculation as to the crew that was being replaced, the non-union members and everything, if there wasn't like something already failing and falling apart within Hollywood, which is what led to what we've been talking about the last few weeks as well. Like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Even if it was just one thing, there are multiple steps in place to make sure if one thing fails, there are other people, other processes, other things will catch it. And it really usually takes a culture of lacking, not just one regulation, a dozen, 24 regulations and procedures completely thrown out the window. And lo and behold, union members were walking off set the day of the fatal incident. There had been 3 misfires during the course of the 21-day shooting, 21-day film schedule. It's 21 days. That's a very short amount of time. Also, this film was purportedly in the $6 million, $7-8 million range. Not that much money in the grand scheme of Hollywood blockbusters. So this is a I don't think
it was. I don't think, and I sorry to interrupt you, Don. I don't think that this, and I only saw the headline of a Wall Street Journal article, which I cannot read because I'm not rich. The Wall Street Journal article said too, and I had a feeling with this too. I don't think this movie is supposed to go to theaters. I don't, because the only name on it's Alec Baldwin. He's a producer on it too. I think this is a direct to streaming release, and there's no indication of a streaming service being connected to this thing. This seems like a relative. I was surprised to hear it was that expensive, because I did not think that this was a very big movie from the jump, because I'd never heard of Sousa. I'd never heard of anybody on this movie besides Alec Baldwin, and he's a producer on it too.
This really does feel like the kind of project where it's to the benefit of everyone who's working, or supposed to be the benefit of everyone working on it. It's a degree. There's a good amount of passion, and the actors want to act these things. And Baldwin himself had produced it. The cast and crew, or the crew especially, like cinematographers. That they want to get these credits, and they want to get these practice, and they want to get these things, and networking to a degree as well. It feels like it was that kind of production, but it doesn't do you any good when you rush everything, because according to some of the stories that are coming out here, the crew was filming 12 to 13 hours a day of this the scheduled 21-day shoot, and that's on top of the crew driving 50 miles each day from Albuquerque to the Bonanza Creek Ranch set, instead of staying at nearby Santa Fe. So on top of the 12 to 13 hours, which there is, I can't wait for the subpoenas to come out and people handing over text messages and emails, because people were actively complaining about this stuff before they brought in the scabs being the non-union members to replace union members who walk out. And it's there's charges are gonna fly here. I know that a lot of consternation was put towards the dumbass social media takes, and people yelling at Alec Baldwin and whatnot. But it does make me wonder, to what degree is Alec Baldwin culpable? Maybe not of the directly pulling the trigger, but of the culture. Because he is a producer. He is a producer.
That's a fair accusation.
I seen that take as well on social media, and there were some people I agreed with, where it's just like, hey, if he is even a producer and he's noticing this shit while on set, and he's letting it go by, and
he's been around.
Yeah, and he's
not a rookie where he's like, well, I'm new in the industry. I'm 27 and 23 years old.
There's
and
every
I don't want to
reason
make
to
a
believe
fuss.
that he was kind of driving the bus on this production. Too,
sure,
because again, like I mentioned before, Joel Sousa is a relatively young, inexperienced director with not a lot of credits under his belt. You got a veteran, elder statesman of acting and Alec Baldwin in there, and he's a producer. It'd be one thing if he was just an actor. Yeah. He's a producer, so he's overseeing a lot of this, I would think.
Also, and here's the big thing, is that also there is a rule that was broken, which is that you're not supposed to point a weapon at anyone And if Alec Baldwin pulled the trigger, and the bullet hit two people, that implies that he was aiming the gun at people. So maybe there was a rule there too. Again, we don't know the full details of all of this, and there's some dumbass social media takes that are going to color this one way or the other. We'll have to wait for the full report. And I think it's safe to say that once a lot more details come out of this, we might revisit this in the future.
Oh, absolutely.
I think we for sure are.
This is a horrifying situation. And this is a worst case scenario. But at the end of the day, no matter how culpable Alec Baldwin himself may be, and the exact steps leading up to that, certainly that's going to be the real magnifying glass. Certainly so, because those are the final steps that lead up to this. It's not in a vacuum. That I think, I hope that's what everyone takes away from this, is that this stuff does not happen in a vacuum. The rule book exists. The rule book exists to make sure these things never, ever happen. People take firearm use very seriously. Even so, when they're fake guns, should probably be even more so, because if they're fake, people might think that they're harmless. Not so the case with this incident. Not so the case. We should have learned with the Brandon Lee, and however many years it's been. We've reset that clock now, and it's fresh in everyone's mind. So, there's even proposed talk of like, maybe we should ban all use of firearms on the set of movies. Not obviously real firearms, but like maybe digitizing. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe that's taking it too much of an extreme. That discussion needs to happen. But at the very least, the rules that were set in place were completely football quarterback thrown out the window. So at the very least that there's that, and it just proves in the saddest and worst way possible, to the point no one wanted to come to this, but it just proves the point that there is a reason why we have these rules. There's a reason why these union rules exist, and why people need to pay attention to these things, because the worst has come to pass. And the only thing we can do here now is learn from it. Who knows? It's up to the IATSE and the many other sub unions to really get to work and maybe drive that point home. So, yeah.
On a final note, I'll just say this, because lost in all the consternation and whatnot, the contempt for Alec Baldwin, rest in peace, Helena Hutchins.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously. I mean, dedicated professional. She's a wife. She's a mother. She's young, award-winning already at a young age.
One of the few working women cinematographers at that level, cut down in her prime. She had a crazy story. She came from the Ukraine while it was part of the Soviet Union. I think she was born in the Arctic Circle, or like raised in the Arctic, something crazy like that. Like that sounds like a movie in and of itself. And it's just crazy story. This is tragic. That's Jesus Christ.
So I want to make sure, rest in peace, Helena Hutchins, because my heart broke for her reading a couple articles that were strictly about her and learning about her. That's the devastating human implication that I think gets lost in a lot of crazy hot take culture. That I could make a couple other points. I want to end with respect to Helena Hutchins too, because a life was lost at the end of the day. We'll keep tabs on this story. This story's not going away. This story's not going away anytime soon. There's a lot more to unpack with it, and we certainly will revisit it when the time comes. Great job with that topic. You guys brought your A game like you normally do. Moving forward, though, we got a big movie to talk about, a highly anticipated, long-awaited, even longer delayed movie. I think I used the same line with No Time to Die, 'tis the season. But we got Dune, finally, Denis Villeneuve's blockbuster, again, highly anticipated spice opera, which I like what we're calling it. I like what a lot of critics are calling it, a spice opera. At first, I'm not going to lie, the first review I saw that had that about 2 weeks before it actually came out in theaters in the US, I thought it was a typo at first, but then I remembered from the original Dune. I'm like, oh yeah, this is the thing that like makes the world go round 33,000 years from now. But yes, we have Dune. We have Dune to talk about, Denis Villeneuve's brand new blockbuster. Joe actually read the novel of it as well, which is good too, because he provides a little bit of perspective on that. And yeah, a lot to unpack with this movie. Star-studded cast, Timothy Chalamet, Zendaya, who's in it for a cup of coffee and a sweet roll. A lot of Jason Momoa, even too, in a little bit of a background role. Lots of stuff to go on here. Immaculately visual movie too. And it's I'll start just by saying this. I'm rambling a little bit. I'll start by saying this. Denis Villeneuve, excellent visionary director, to say the least. He's made, I know we like a lot of his movies, Blade Runner 2049, There's Arrival. He really, French-Canadian director, really started with a lot of different like oddball French movies. I remember Incendies when that came out. That was a big one at the Oscars that year. Then he made his American debut with Prisoners, which is still one of my favorite movies of the last decade.
Same.
Quite honestly. Just a brash, muscular, great thriller. Then you have Sicario, obviously, Arrival. So no better director right off the bat than to take a stab at a movie that was considered unfilmable for decades. I'll just start, not even touching on the movie. I just want to mention this. If you haven't read it yet, I highly recommend reading about Alejandro Jodorowsky's. He's a Chilean French director. His Dune movie that was conceptualized for years, the 10-hour epic with Orson Welles, set to star Orson Welles, Salvador Dali. I think even Mick Jagger was going to be in the damn thing too. And it never came to fruition. The closest thing we got was a documentary called Jodorowsky's Dune in 2013 that was sort of assembled from his many notes and scrapbooks on it. And then we got the Alan Smithy, a.k.a. David Lynch, directed 1984 movie, and that's about all I want to say about that thing. Take it, Joe.
No, I wanted to bring up that documentary because I've been telling people, like, once part 2 of this comes out and you get done watching it, or if you ever read the book, definitely check out that documentary because it's a wild ride to see like what that man wanted to do with this. But yes,
there's a reason it was going to be 10 hours, and there's a reason there's a kind of a reason it didn't get made. I think the budget kept exploding on it.
Yeah.
But I'll turn it over to Joe, though. Joe's chomping at the bit to talk about this. Let me give him the floor.
Yeah, no. So yes, the movie is based on the book, and it's basically, you know, like if you think about the hero's journey, it follows the same thing. You follow a character named Paul, played by Timothy Chalamet, going to a planet where they need to get, you know, a resource called spice. If you've seen, like Steve said, the David Lynch film, you're familiar with this plot and everything. If you've seen Star Wars, you're familiar with this plot and everything. What makes Dune so special, though, is what they end up doing with the hero's journey. However, the biggest problem with this movie, and I hate to start off with a problem, is that you don't really get to see that in Dune Part 1, because Dune Part 1 is a lot of setting up and exposition for the first hour and like 30 minutes of this movie.
That's right. We got a 9-figure budget, sexy ass prologue right here.
And that's not to say, like, even though I'm saying that, that's not to say like I wasn't entertained when it was doing this. No, I very much was, because one, the film looks beautiful. It's shot so damn good, thanks to Greg Fraser, who's going to be working on the upcoming Batman movie and worked on movies like Zero Dark 30, The Gambler, Foxcatcher. He did cinematography for those movies.
He did Foxcatcher. That's right. And that was a good looking, interesting movie.
Yes, it was. Yeah. And then the other blockbusters he worked on, he did some episodes of The Mandalorian. Like I said, he's done Dune, obviously. The upcoming Batman film, and he's returning for Dune Part 2 as well. So it's a very beautiful looking film, and as somebody who read the book, a lot of the architecture that they describe in the book is very much captured here, as well as just the cinematography kind of just goes hand in hand with that, where it shows like how wide and vast this desert is and how big these ships are, and the description of, like, you know, the armors, the description of the Harkonnens, which are the villains of this movie. Everything visually about this movie, everything technical about it, to where even Christopher Nolan came out and said, well, damn, like, Denis Villeneuve just proved me wrong that, like, having special effects and practical effects in the same movie can look this good. It's so amazing to see and look at, and like, that's not to say like the story isn't either. The story is good. It's just the base of it, though, like, for the most of the time when you're watching this movie, it's just a lot of exposition. As Steve was saying, Zendaya, she shows up for the first 5 minutes and the last 5 minutes. The rest of the time you see Zendaya in this movie, get ready to just see her walking in a desert. Momoa, who plays a character that's much bigger even in the first half of the book, Duncan Idaho, he's only in it for a few minutes. Oscar Isaac, another one, like, he is Timothée Chalamet's father. He plays the Duke in this movie. Only in it for about, I would say, 15 minutes total. And it sucks because the scenes between Paul and the Duke in the book are very good and very much make you, like, care for their relationship, as well as House Atreides, the house they represent, to go to this planet and help, like, salvage the spice there, to give it to the Emperor. The only person I really thought that actually played the character well, translated from the book, but even, like, looking at it as, like, a standalone character that I'm like, okay, you know what, I'm actually, like, really getting, like, who she is and everything, was Lady Jessica, played by Rebecca Ferguson, who I felt like, all right, if there's anybody in this movie that is at least, like, I'm getting some character development, it's her, because of the the panic that she has about her son possibly being this chosen one, her husband that is going to this planet, like, you very much sense, like, a motherly, like, protection over Paul with her, as well as the rest of her family. And I thought she played it very well. And it sucks to say that I can't say the same for Timothée Chalamet as Paul, who, he did a good job. Don't get me wrong. Everybody in this movie's great. They play their roles so damn good. But it's like none of their arcs are completed, or they're just getting started by the end of this movie.
And before I throw it over to you, Dom, too, it's one of those things, too, where I've never read Dune. I knew kind of the skeleton of the story. I have seen the 84 movie. That was several years ago. But it's one of those things, too, where it's like, I'll get into my biggest gripe with the movie, which is in line with Joe's to a degree. I'll get into that later after the intermission. But, like, this story, there's a reason this thing was called unfilmable for so many years. The writing process alone, forget the budget, throw the budget out the window for a minute. The writing process on this alone is excruciating, is absolutely, positively excruciating, with the amount of characters, the amount of buildup, the amount of scene setting.
The amount of world building you have to do. Which the film does great. I'm not discrediting that, but it's just like, you have to get this done in one film. That's why
all due respect to Frank Herbert, the late great Frank Herbert, that dude had to be a cellar dweller in order to come up with this sort of thing. This guy had to be, that Always Sunny Charlie Day meme with the Post-it notes and, like, the lines and everything. Like, that had to be this guy's basement at the end of the day, coming up with such a wild and detail-oriented story. And it's funny, and we'll touch on this. I don't even want to bring it up. Dom, take it from me. I'll touch on it later.
Yeah. Viewing this movie, I realized something, and that is, I am not a fan of high fantasy at all. High fantasy. So elves, don't care about them. Orcs, dwarves, all that stuff, I don't care. But I'll make an exception for Lord of the Rings. I will make an exception for Lord of the Rings because they are the OGs. That's the OG fantasy stuff. Tolkien right there. I'll make an exception. But everything else, I don't really care. Anything else with that aesthetic. Dune, despite having so many things that seemingly aren't recycled, the first half hour of this movie, I'm like, damn, this movie's really trying hard to not be Star Wars. Really, really hard, right? And despite having a lot of the, visual and, world building tropes of sci-fi, I made an exception for it because Dune is one of the OGs as well. Landmark work of soft and hard science fiction. Soft science fiction being, a little more fantastical, but having those space and technological elements, and then hard science fiction, which is like, really more in the line of like Arrival, Denis Villeneuve's Arrival, where it's like, okay, everything is as precise as we can possibly make it, very technical. But all that stuff aside, I'll make an exception. Even then, however, I did find myself getting a little bit feeling that the story was generic.
Yeah.
Again, I could put that aside because I know it was an OG, and this whole franchise has been whipped around. It could barely even be a franchise because they could never get it off the ground. But it's been whipped around so much, and it's like, this feels bad for what should be the Lord of the Rings of its of sci-fi, of its genre. Yeah, exactly. So to see it realized well, it's like, you know what? There's a kid growing up seeing Dune right now, and they're absolutely loving it, having never seen other things like this before. Awesome. That's great. The thing that was like, okay, I'm in. That freaking worm scene, man. That is, when it comes to Dune, there are two things with Dune: sand and that fucking worm. That's all people know about Dune in the mainstream. The worm more than sand. And if they can pull it off, then this movie has legs.
The worms.
God damn. When that scene with the worm, they killed it. That Hans Zimmer score killed it. The sense of scale massacred it. When it comes out, the sense of awe and power of this thing nailed it. I'm like, okay,
you got me.
No, you're absolutely right. Because like as me who read the book, like when that scene happens, that's where the book really starts to pick up. And it sucks that like when that scene happens in the movie, you're like almost done with the movie. You got about another like 40 minutes left, and then we're done here. It just makes me go, oh my god, like part 2 is gonna be amazing if they actually like put this much care and effort that they're putting in the part 1. And I know it will because it's Denis Villeneuve. Because Dom, everything you're saying, I totally see it from both your guys' perspectives, because you guys don't, you guys are viewing this as a movie alone, and I'm trying to do that as well. It's just hard for me to also think of like, well, damn, but I know like the second half of this book, it really does play with your expectations on the hero's journey and really does mix things up. I don't want to say what it is because I don't want to ruin Dune Part 2 for people before it comes out. But like I'm very much looking forward to where it's going, especially some of the scenes they do set up that do kind of give a little bit of a hint to what's going to happen in Dune 2. But go on, Dom. Sorry.
No, I just want to give a shout out to this film's sound design. If there's any movie you're going to see in theaters, I wouldn't even say, God damn, HBO Max screwing over this film just because, I mean, I'm sure it's doing well actually in terms of the profit, but in terms of the sound design, oh my God, please see this in theaters. If there's one movie you're going to see, it's this. It's probably going to be this. I saw it in the Tivoli. It actually blew, I think this film blew out a speaker, because when we watched it, the back left speaker at the Tivoli, which is usually great, had like a speaker that was the whole time. Like, every time that worm, because the worm was like maximum intensity and like the war scene too, it was like, I'm like, oh, this blew out. A previous showing
Hans did his job.
Yeah,
Hans
exactly.
did his
Anyway,
job because not only did he try to break the sound barrier, he tried to invent new sounds on top of it.
Yeah.
And he did a damn good job. And I've been critical of Hans Zimmer's scores in the past in some ways. He brought justice to this movie on top of the visual hypnosis that takes place. We're butting up against a very brief intermission. It's Sleepless with Steve. We come to you live and in living color every Wednesday evening. Be back after a couple of minutes talking more Dune and then Dune's box office. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back. I don't know if y'all like apples, but that intermission had to be less than 60 seconds. How you like them apples? This is Sleepless with Steve, live on YouTube. Come to you live and in living color. A lot of color today. every Wednesday evening, 6:30 Central Time, talking Dune. Let's jump right back into it. We left off just a minute ago on the Hans Zimmer score, which evidently blew out one of the Tivoli speakers. My condolences. But this is a movie born to be in the theater.
Absolutely.
So much so that it's gonna really, in a way, suck. Like I feel like once a year almost we get a movie that is so tailor-made to be part of the theater experience. Maybe not once a year, maybe once every couple years. I mean, the last major one I can think about is Dunkirk. That's the last major one, and it's been about 4 years since that movie, shockingly. Don't look now. But every once in a while, it's like we get a movie that's plays so damn well in the theaters that I just think, this is not going to be the same on FX when there's Viagra and CarMax commercials in between. This is just not going to be the same.
Well,
even if you have a respectable sound system, I don't think, like a sound bar and a big-ass TV, I don't think that this is going to be replicated very easily.
I actually throw one into the ring as well, as like it was meant for theaters, and it came out actually more recently, 1917. The Sam
Absolutely.
Mendes, like that was definitely another one too. And again, another war film though. But I saw this in Dolby, and yeah, it brought back like everything. It's like, oh yeah, this is why I love going to the movies, is where you get these movies where it is a director's vision, like Dunkirk was, like 1917 was, and it's got a big budget, and it just wants to sell you on how damn good he can make a movie. And Denis Villeneuve delivers. Like, I mean, my chair was like shaking like this. I would like sit up like during action scenes. I would be like, like just kind of like looking all over the place during like wide shots of this desert. Yeah, it's just a desert, but deserts look beautiful in this movie. There's just something about them. Yeah, it absolutely is a movie made for the theater experience.
And sci-fi and fantasy movies age best based on how well their themes carry over. And when it comes to the themes of Dune, which obviously address colonialism, the theft of natural resources, and so on and so forth, this movie keeps those intact. And it's odd, and again, I don't want to bleed too much into the further discussion too, but it's odd given the fact that like this is the granddaddy of sci-fi movies and fantasy movies and epics to begin with, that it feels like the cultural impact of Dune is still very niche compared to its, the ones that were undoubtedly inspired by it, like Lord of the Rings, like Star Wars, namely, so it's interesting to see that, but it's also profound in a way to not only see this movie come to fruition in one way or another, helmed by one of the best directors working today in Denis Villeneuve by any stretch of the imagination, but also just given the fact too, that the themes are very well presented. I would argue the themes here are as well presented as the visuals and this cutting edge sound design at the end of the day too. I don't know how it holds up to the book, but I'm sure Giuseppe over here will educate me.
This is the thing. The movie did it better than the book here, because the book gets lost in talking about so much stuff. The book is so, I mean, like, just to give you an idea, and I wanted to show this, like,
is it the Tolkien approach where it's like they go on for like a tree for like 30 chapters or something?
The Ayn Rand school of writing.
The sandworm gets like 3 chapters of itself. You might as well like he's granted that because he's a sandworm. But this movie has an index and like a glossary for you to use to learn more about Dune. Yeah. And to me, it's like the themes of the book get a little bit lost because of that. Because there is so much world building going on in the book, where Denny, I found actually a good balance, because this world is beautifully crafted, it feels lived in, and you feel like you're actually a part of this world throughout all of its scenes. And like you're learning with Paul how the planet Arconis works, and like everything, like the how the air works on this planet, what is spice, all this stuff. And you'll even learn more when we get to part 2. But the themes itself, oh my god, the movie did it so much better than the book, because the book gets lost talking about all this other stuff that like you kind of it loses focus on what the themes are.
It gets lost in the terminology.
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of themes, it is striking how a novel penned in 1965. It's like, oh, okay, they're talking about Afghanistan, and then you come to 2021, it's like, oh, they're talking about Afghanistan. Cool, same thing. But in any case, as someone, me, who is like inundated with useless trivia with all these sci-fi worlds, Star Wars, Star Trek, Warhammer, freaking Halo, I have read so many wiki articles on all these individual universe wikis, fandom wikis. I hate it to a degree, but it's like I'm tied to it because I've read so much of it. As someone who's done deep dives, it's like I kind of hate this. And again, it is amazing how even though I am just kind of jaded with at least sci-fi to a degree, particularly when it's done poorly, even then, Villeneuve makes this work so well because the exposition, the first 40, everything pre-worm, before they introduce the worm and things really start to pick. I know.
But really, you're so right, because that's when it becomes a blockbuster, is when that thing shows up.
No, yeah, it really does. But even then, you know what carries it? That was opening 40-ish minutes is the artistry.
Yeah.
In so much is the cinematography and the set design and how tangible so many things feel. All right, this isn't a SYFY sci-fi original movie with some cheap or like CW-esque CW level CGI. This is some good stuff here that you're getting. The cinematography, I don't even know what planet this was. It's like the bad guy planet, the Emperor planet, the Stellan Skarsgård that planet. Yeah, all that stuff. It's like, god damn, I was getting like, yeah, this is definitely the same guy who made 2049 Blade Runner, because
you can tell like, that
this is some cinematography, like god damn,
capital C cinematography.
100%. The shadows, the color, the everything in that sense. I wish I could do like a breakdown bit by bit, and believe me, there's going to be YouTube videos about this in the years to come.
Oh, he already has his Vanity Fair like video breaking down shots of this movie, and I watched it.
Yeah, and that stuff, it's so interesting and it's so meaty that even if you're the most casual viewer who's just waiting for the worm to show up and the war scenes to show up, you don't realize it, but that stuff carries so much. It does impact you. It really does. If not the first time you watch it, upon later rewatch, and it gets you through it. And the work there should not go unrecognized.
Now, the movie I'm about to say, I think one is a better movie than Dune, but it gave me the same feeling. The Fellowship of the Ring, I feel like gave me the same feelings I was having with this movie, but it just felt like a complete movie by the end of it. Where it's like I'm being introduced to a world, how it works and everything, and it's like, while we're taking all this time to set up what are the rings, who is, all these villains, the orcs and everything, everything looks so beautiful. As much as I'm like we're sitting around with elves and dwarves and everything talking about this and the politics of this whole thing, it looks so damn cool to look at. Like, it's just like, it's so cool to see and everything, and Dune captures that as well. It's just like, wow, like I haven't had this feeling again with a universe being introduced to me, and something that I'm familiar with from the book even too. I've never had this much fun just being like, man, like it's cool just to see how stuff works in a movie. Like we don't really get that with sci-fi blockbusters anymore, because most of the time they just want to be a Force Awakens, even what Star Trek became, which I do like the new Star Trek films, but let's be honest here, they just wanted to be action films. We haven't really gotten like another sci-fi movie where it's just like, no, we're just here to explore a world. Yeah, there'll be action and everything, but we're gonna take our time.
I'll never forget that quote from Chris Pine, where he's like, Chris Pine, who is in the new Star Trek movies, and he's like, I don't think we can ever make a cerebral Star Trek film ever again.
That might be like the fourth time you've brought that quote up in the last
and it's
I would say 3 months.
And I bring it up because it's so indicative of so many things, and you could not have said it more about I even sympathize with it to a degree, because you probably can, I don't know, but it's just like Star Trek was built to be cerebral, not action, and that's where we are with the franchise now, and it's incredible.
I mean, there's a lot to praise here too. The thing that I will say though is that, and this is where I'll introduce my only gripe, and it's the big one, but it doesn't derail the experience, and it doesn't make me advise anybody against seeing this. And maybe this is a me problem, I don't know, although I don't think it is, because I did see some discourse online throughout the last couple of days that kind of echoes my sentiment on there, is that like I was more consistently impressed by this movie than I was consistently entertained. And That is my major thing. And the reason I say that too is that I can sing the praises of the aesthetics all day long, and I certainly will. But I was not grabbed by very many people in this movie. I was not connected to these characters. And that's a big problem for me. And I am also not I don't know how many times I have to say this. I'm also not the person to go to with science fiction and fantasy to begin with. So I lean more heavy when we do these kind of reviews on you two, gentlemen, because you two are more well-versed and passionate about this. So your opinion carries a bit more weight than somebody like me, who has never really been tethered to any of these franchises, even Star Wars, on like a whimsical, even nostalgic level. But like, and from all accounts too, my best friend who loved Dune, the book, was disappointed by the movie. He said the same thing. He said the same thing. He said there's and I wonder if Joe, you echo this sentiment. He's like, there's so much rich. He's like, it's not Herbert's novel that neglected the characters and the interpersonal dynamics. He's like, that's the movie's problem. He's like, the movie got wrapped up so much in the world itself and the groundwork and the analytical aspect of it that they forgot to make the characters outside of like Momoa's character, like actually kind of human and kind of fun. I was not I'll truth be told, and I like him as an actor, I was not very impressed with Timothée Chalamet here. But I think it's more of the fault of the writing too, because for a protagonist, he's just bland. The only two people that really grabbed me in any sort of way, where I'm glad Joe brought her up earlier, is Rebecca Ferguson as Lady Jessica. I liked her a lot. I liked Momoa whenever he appeared on screen. Oscar
well, he's
Isaac
just playing Aquaman in this movie, man. I mean, like
he
that,
really
that
is.
is
but
who
he's
Duncan.
A little personality.
No, but that is who he is in the book. It's just like he just elevates it to just being Aquaman.
He's a
okay. So just have everyone crack jokes. That's the solution.
No,
just have everyone crack jokes.
That's not what I'm suggesting. No. I'm suggesting somebody who doesn't talk like this and goes on.
Yes.
An exposition.
Yes.
And we got to get the spice. And the hushed monotone drives me nuts, and it's become more commonplace.
It really sucks because where the book starts out isn't where the movie starts. The book, okay, since we've all seen this in the trailers, and us three have seen it. The book actually starts at the scene where Paul has to put his hand in the box, and this is where he's told the journey and everything. And they don't leave for that planet for a long time. He like Duncan Idaho doesn't leave before he does. Like he stays with him and like trains him, then he leaves and everything. But in the movie, it's Josh Brolin's training his character and everything. There's a lot more scenes between the Duke and Paul, and you really get to the sense of like what the future of the house will be for Paul and everything. And it's just a lot of just great scenes together. And it's like, Dom, as much as you're saying like, oh, just make jokes and everything. The book,
I was being facetious. I was being facetious.
I know you're saying that, and I know you're being facetious about it, but to an extent, like the book at least has moments like that, where it's like there are some funny like moments between Paul and his father and everything, and just like things that they share about their grandfathers, things that they share about like the planets and everything that they've lived on or got to like explore and whatnot. It's some rich history there and some great world building and of course character development. It's not here in this movie at all, except for the two characters that Steve is saying. It really isn't. Timothée Chalamet, like I'm giving him some slack because it's just like I am thinking it is the writing, because I've seen him in other stuff too. Can't wait to see him this weekend in The French Dispatch. And knowing the book, it's like, where we're at in this movie, this is where Paul's not an interesting main character until the second half of the book. So I knew this going into the movie. I was like, he's probably going to be the mopey kid that he is in the book for this whole
movie.
Very
opaque.
Yeah. Father, what am I going to do about House Atreides? Like, he does that like in the book and everything.
As an elite impression.
And it's like Oscar Isaac, who is an amazing actor as well, but he's playing it the same way. And to me, like when I was reading the book, that's not how I took the Duke's. Like I took the Duke as like a caring father, honestly. In the movie, I could just write him off as just being like another just overlord of like an army or something. And I was very disappointed to see how he was interpreted in the movie. You're absolutely right about that. It does suck, and I'm just hoping. Because, again, I keep saying the second half of the book, part 2, is going to be so much better. Because it is. The second half of the book is really what the book is known for. So, to me, and I even, this is how I feel about the movie in general. I feel like once part 2 comes out, I feel like you really do have to watch this movie back to back with part one as well.
Probably.
To me, it's like that to me is like I don't care what anybody could tell me, like, well, no, they're two separate films. It's like, no, to me, like, it's one film. Like, if Zack Snyder can have his 4.5-hour Justice League, then damn it, I want my 4.5-hour Dune. Like, all right.
There's a case to be made for that. I do know that, yeah, one of my main problems with this movie, at least right now, is that it commits the sin that Empire Strikes Back did, but The Godfather 2 didn't, which is that every single Godfather film, put them together, I think they're fantastic, but you take them apart, they're still fantastic, equally so. Whereas with the Star Wars films, the first one you can watch on its own, second one not so much. You really do have to watch Empire followed by Return. So with this, with Dune, it's like, okay, will we get over that in 5-7 years when all is said and done and people are going to be watching these back to back? I don't know. I guess maybe it's more of a case of marketing, but I do know that, yeah, Steve said it best, is that in terms of the engagement of these characters or lack thereof, it's the movie's problem, because this it's funny. It's like this whole universe, it was 1965, before Star Wars, or maybe after Star. When did Star Trek first come out? I don't know. But
even Doctor Who,
regardless,
hell, throw that in there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
66, 1 year before Star Trek. Yeah, this predates so much of established sci-fi today, and yet I don't think anyone's going to come out of here caring about. I can't even remember Paul. No one cares about Paul Atreides. He's just too generic.
There's kind of a reason, and this is probably for the better and why this still is so storied. Not to say Star Wars and Lord of the Rings aren't. There's kind of a reason, though, we really didn't get Dune action figures growing up.
Yeah.
There's kind of a reason for that. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but there's a reason this didn't leave like a sweet. It left an impact. I won't say it didn't. Clearly, it did. As a granddaddy of sci-fi, but it didn't leave a cultural impact like Lord of the Rings, like Star Trek, like Star Wars, like its contemporaries.
Yeah. I think it commits the sin of just being very late to the party. Obviously, there's David Lynch's 1984 Dune, which, by the way, I right after coming home, I actually watched. It's like Chelsea. She actually, funny enough, she doesn't watch a lot of movies. She did watch the 1984 David Lynch Dune as one of those like so bad it's good kind of movies. And my God, I was like, yeah, I just can't get over the fact that Sting is in this movie.
It's so funny. Like, you go and you watch the force field scene, like the training sequence in that movie.
I remember that one.
And it's just like you're watching two Lego bricks just go at each other. Compared to this movie,
there's a reason, David. I'm not going to say it's abysmal.
No, it's not.
But there's a reason David Lynch took his name off the damn thing.
Yeah.
There's a reason for that. If not only the fact that it didn't live up to his personal standards, but I can confidently say it doesn't do Herbert's text much justice.
And the thing is too is like it while it is late to the party, there's no way in hell this movie I think could have been made with the amount of care, effort, and like what we got to see on screen if this came out in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s. Like, this movie was like, this book was destined to be made with the technology that we have now when it comes to movies.
And it says something too, that the culture has higher standards. The culture has higher standards.
Yeah.
That's why you go back to the early Marvel movies and stuff like that, and you're just like, my God, these things suck for the most part. Daredevil, Elektra, Man-Thing, it's the same thing. You know what I mean?
You know what? This is a Denis Villeneuve, joint.
Yeah.
This is not going to be cash cow to hell like Star Wars. This is from the guy who made Blade Runner 2049. That is hard sci-fi. That is like pretentious level sci-fi.
And I thought you would never get like another movie with that amount of money like he did for Dune after making
This is the guy who made Arrival, right? It's like, and you know what? I'm okay with that. Yeah. Let Dune be the high prestigious thing that it is. Yeah. And maybe, it would have been cool if there was like a cool Lord of the Rings trilogy kind of crossover where it's like mainstream crossover where it's like, yeah, we can make memes about this and enjoy it on a cultural level, but it can still be this high religious thing like it is for Tolkien. But you know what? Just the fact that this franchise gets a second second breath of fresh air from the 1984 disaster. I'm cool with it, and the fact that it's getting a part 2 at all, I'm just happy with all that. I think we should close out of here.
Yes.
Dude, hashtag watch it for the worm. That's it, man. That's your cinematic adventure for the holiday season. I'm not joking. What Hans Zimmer accomplished in providing that theme for that scene, that is like Williams level, John Williams level esque.
That's career highlight reel material.
1000%. Just when you think that guy can't churn out something else, he killed it for that. Like I literally went home and it's like that theme was so good I had to look it up on YouTube. It's that is a highlight for sure. And everything else around it is at worst, I think, serviceable and maybe too generic in terms of sci-fi, but it'll be some good stuff. And I'm very much looking forward to part 2. The highest 3 out of 4 stars that I can give this thing, without a doubt.
I'll piggyback off that, and then Joe will close, and we'll move to the next topic leading into Sleepless OT here, as I knew we probably would. But yeah, like I said, I go back to the notion that, or the statement I made earlier, that I feel like I was more impressed than entertained a lot of the time with this movie. But I still think that, I go to the movies quite a lot. We go to the movies quite a lot. I can't say I'm impressed very often or blown away very often. So that's not faint praise. It sounds like a negative poll quote, but it really isn't. It's more of an attack on the writing than anything. But I do think that with a movie this huge, with a scope this large, and with pressure this big too, let's be real, I think it was well handled. I do think as far as prologues are concerned, this was well done. And I really look forward to Dune Part 2. I really think that, if nothing else, too, will make people like myself probably, hopefully, greatly appreciate Part 1 even more in that context for what's coming. Because I can't wait to watch this again, maybe the morning of going to see Dune Part 2. I think that's probably what I'm going to do. It is the strongest 3 out of 4 stars that I can bestow upon it. But I couldn't get over that hump, though, just coming out of it. Outside of the visual hypnosis, which is the term I keep subscribing to this movie, I can't overcome the coldness I still felt leaving the theater, outside of maybe 2 or 3 characters who weren't even the main characters, feeling a little empty. I suspect, especially in the regard of Zendaya, that will change upon Part 2. It's 3 out of 4 stars for me. Joe, what say you?
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you guys, and with everything that the criticisms you've brought up, Steve, and all the positives you guys have said. It is a spectacle. I mean, like, the fact that, like, if any of you Dune fans that end up seeing this on YouTube later and get all fed up and angry with us, because I've seen some people give it, like, just straight up 10 out of 10s because, like, they're such big fans of the books and everything. Look, the fact that, like, Steve, Dom, and myself, while we have these criticisms, we're just glowing about this movie and the fact that it actually was made. The fact that a movie that is called unfilmable was done this damn well. I mean, that in itself should just make you want to go see it. Like, especially if you're familiar with the source material, you'll be like, "Well, damn, he did that pretty good." Like, for myself, removing the book aspect and everything, I look at it as a movie. I watched it twice already. I watched it one more time on HBO Max when I was at home, just to kind of like really view it as a movie. It is a spectacle. It is amazing to see, but in terms of storytelling and entertainment, it is lacking there. I've told people, including my own parents, who were interested in going to see this because of all the hype surrounding around it and everything. I told them that, I hate to say it, you're better off watching on HBO Max or just wait for Part 2 to come out and watch them back to back, because then you'll feel like you actually got a complete story here. You felt like something was really whole and like you'll be more entertained. Because even Denny himself came out and said, yeah, Part 2 of the movie, yeah, it's going to have everything like, more of a blockbuster feel to it, because yeah, you're going to get into what the book is known for. You're going to get into more battles and everything, because everything now has been put in place. Like, literally, when this movie ends, I'm like, wow, literally all the chess pieces have been assembled it's time to play the game of chess now because like everything's ready to go. That's literally all part 2 has to do is just click play, and it's like, all right, cool, 4 out of 4 stars. But for Dune itself, part 1, I almost gave it 2.5 out of 3 stars. I really almost did until like I watched it a second time and really just focused on the filmmaking there and everything, because I really was let down by it upon first viewing. I love what he did and everything. This is my least favorite Denis Villeneuve movie, but I was a little bit let down. But I will also go with a big 3 out of 4 stars here.
We've reached the cap with 3 out of 4 stars, I think, for the gravity of the rating.
we need to give like start getting into like fractional stuff.
Nah,
yeah, exactly. No, like
game.
0.75.
You're lucky I allow half stars at the end of the day. Nah, like I said, and we do it out of 4 too. And one more quick thing I didn't mention in my recap too. You know, I see a lot of movies every year. We see a lot of movies and stuff. You know, wasn't it great to see a movie with a 9-figure budget that didn't feel like it was assembled in a damn boardroom?
That, or was it trying to market you the new toy that you can get at Target? When
it had a vision. Yeah. Like, this is sci-fi with a real brain in its head.
That's the thing is, like, I told my friends this, too, that I saw it with, like, when we got done watching it. And most of my friends did enjoy it. Some of them thought it was okay. But when they asked me, like, you know, like, is this going to be one of your favorite movies of the year? I said, I'm going to sound really stupid for saying this. No, but I think it's better than most blockbusters I've seen this year, including Shang-Chi. And they wanted to all beat my ass after I said that because they all love Shang-Chi.
That's a good take. I respect that. That's a good take because I can kind of agree with that.
But yeah, it's because, like, I never really get to see blockbusters like this anymore. Like, the last time I saw this was Blade Runner 2049, where it's just like, damn, look how much money was spent on this movie that's not going to even make a fraction of it back.
A legacy sequel, if you will.
Yeah.
But we're bleeding into Sleepless OT. We're not going to take as much time as maybe we intended to take on this. But I do want to monologue for a moment about the box office haul, because really we can't speculate about a sequel. We already know Dune Part 2, blessed so, is coming. It would quite honestly be one of the great tragedies, I think, of modern day cinema if this did not get the Part 2 that it deserved. This would be, I think, the outcry alone. It would have been like a soap opera level outcry. And I use that example just because of the fact that, like, when soap operas are threatened to get canceled, the small but loyal fan base bombards the network so much that they renege. All my children went through that all those years. I'm done talking about soap operas. I can't stand the damn
And then Netflix would come in and be like, guess what, guys? We bought Dune. We'll make Part 2, and it won't be as good.
No. Whatever that Drake meme is with the hotline bling, no soap operas. We talking spice operas here. But anyway, moreover, though, I want to start this. I want to play a game first things first. What if I asked you which movie would get a sequel immediately greenlit after its opening weekend? Would it be the star-studded James Gunn Suicide Squad movie, or would it be Denis Villeneuve's Dune? If I asked you in January 2021, which movie is going to get a sequel immediately after its box office opening weekend, what if I told you one would earn $26 million opening weekend and be deemed a potentially financially devastating failure versus a $40 million weekend? One would be considered terrible. The other would be considered overperforming $30 million estimates. Would you guess correctly between Suicide Squad and Dune? I damn sure wouldn't either.
I would have looked at the history of box offices and be like, well, judging from Blade Runner alone, hell no.
And that's the thing that I think is so amazing about this Dune story to begin with, too. Dune had the best opening for a Warner Brothers title in 2021, let alone Denis Villeneuve's entire career. It surpassed the Suicide Squad. It surpassed Space Jam 2. It blew In the Heights out of the water opening weekend. Although it might not stand with The Matrix 4 coming out in December, but that's a different barometer of success for that franchise.
Even when we talked about all the movies coming to HBO Max, I even said, I'm like, oh yeah, the reason why they're probably doing this is because they might not think these movies will make the amount of money that they won't make that much money in theaters regardless if there's a pandemic or not, so it's like they're not losing much. Because I was like, when I saw Dune was on there and a lot of other dramas, which only, like, at the time I was like, oh, the only blockbusters really on here that, like, they're really probably expected to make money with is The Matrix and Suicide Squad. I never thought Dune was going to come this close to making this amount of money, but also this much viewership too on HBO Max. If you like, honestly, if you handed me that catalog of HBO films that were coming day one, I would have told Dune probably would have been at the bottom. I would be like, yeah, I probably would get like the least viewership and the least amount of money in theaters.
Honestly, that's not a hot take, I don't think. And I can't remember the last time many of us film nerds, excuse me, cinephiles, all collectively planned to see a movie. Yet we're on pins and needles waiting to see the receipts on a franchise starting blockbuster. I legit cannot remember the last time this has happened. A sequel was dependent on the opening weekend. A sequel was dependent on the box office success of this whole thing. And as it stands, Dune has grossed $223.2 million on a $165 million budget. 300 million is about the break-even point, and it will likely get to that and exceed it in the next couple of weeks. And then furthermore, just to assess the numbers here, and then we'll just go in and make quick points on that. HBO Max viewership was at about 1.9 million households over the weekend. It didn't quite reach the levels of Wonder Woman 1984 nor Space Jam 2. Or, Jesus, that was my next point. You stole my closing argument here. You stole my closing point here. Who the hell knew Mortal Kombat netted almost 4 million viewers too? Where was that? That blew my high.
Where's been all of this data since we've been talking about the HBO Max movies?
Quite frankly, yes. Because when you sent that article in the group chat with that graph, I said, where the hell have you been all my life? I've been dying to know the household, viewership of these movies and stuff. I would have probably guessed Space Jam 2 and Wonder Woman 1984 were the top two. That's if you would have just given it to me straight, I would have guessed probably the top two. I would have never thought that Mortal Kombat almost doubled that viewership. But the last point, though, I'll make, first off, watch out, King Richard. King Richard about to break them records. Anyway, no, but the final point I'll make, though, is that I was really happy that Warner Brothers greenlit this sequel as early as they did. And not only that, too, like even before the movie was out, I think the day before, the Warner Brothers CEO even basically confirmed it lightly and said, no, we are embracing Dune Part 2.
Yeah, she did.
She did. She basically came out and said, we're embracing it. We're embracing it wholeheartedly. And then soon enough, it was obviously greenlit. And, it's a big dub, I think, not only for Dune fans, but I think the sci-fi community as a whole, because it's been a long, long time since we got a movie this intelligent.
It's a big W for the fans. It's a big W for cinephiles like us that really do appreciate this kind of filmmaking. And yeah, it's a big W for sci-fi fans. When's the last time sci-fi fans have been getting the short end of the sticks because of superhero movies lately? They really don't get too many and then they get the Star Wars films and we don't have to go into that, but they've been dying and itching to get a new sci-fi film to go see and really go into a different universe in the space again, because they were not getting that for the longest time.
Dom, what say you about Dune's box office haul? You get the final word.
It really is remarkable where we are in the film industry, because 2020 hit the reset button on everything, it feels like, and now it's the numbers are all the way down here now in terms of box office. This is our bar. The bar's been lowered, but now we have this new factor with streaming. The acceleration button has been hit on that, and we're really seeing it come forward here, especially ever since HBO went all in on it. Much to the chagrin of maybe a lot of the directors and actors, but they went all in on it, and now we're seeing kind of the fruits of that come through. And in the history books, in terms of how streaming really took over, how HBO approached the pandemic is absolutely going to be it's going to be a flashpoint without a doubt. I like to think, this is magical thinking for me, I like to think that just part of it was just, we're going to embrace this because Denis Villeneuve just knows what he's doing. He's every single movie he's made, at least that I know of, since Sicario, for the last 6 years, it's just been hits. Maybe not box office hits, maybe, haven't come the returns, but they're winning awards. And I would think every actor and every anyone who works with them would want to say that they worked with Denis Villeneuve, because I'm thinking back to Sicario, that scene on the bridge. I'm thinking back to Arrival, and how so much of that was so awesome. So that's more fantastical thinking. That maybe there's a factor of it too, but really the fact that this delivered at all, for something that was such a disaster, right? Back in 1984, seemingly, that it is refreshing. So yeah, we'll see what part 2 does and how the movie industry is looking then. But for now, I think this is probably the best thing to come out of HBO's decision, because we're kind of tying it back to that HBO decision last December. So I think this is probably the best to come out of that since then.
Because when you threw HBO Max in the Dune equation, there was real concern from Villeneuve himself. Excuse me, and just from film fans are like, oh my God, is this sacrifice really going to cost us Dune Part 2?
Yeah.
And thankfully it didn't. So it was a good way to end the show. We're not ending on an uncertain note. We're ending on a positive note. And I look forward to Dune Part 2 in 2023. That's going to do our show tonight, though. What a big, big show. Great job to both of you gentlemen. Came with your A game like I expected. Well-read, well-versed. Very fun show to do tonight. And I'm looking forward to next week's show because we're touching on Army of Thieves. We're going back to Army of the Dead, which all three of us had a lot to say about, the Zack Snyder movie on Netflix a few months ago. We all had a lot to say about that movie. Some good, some bad. Now we're getting a prequel that I'm looking forward to watching this weekend.
Actually, today, too, speaking of sequels being announced, the Army of the Dead sequel, Planet of the Dead, has been announced.
Here it goes. One at a time. One at a time over here. Okay, before we
this
get
franchise is unintentionally becoming our muse.
A little bit, yeah, a little bit in some ways. I can't wait to review it next week, though. We were going to do Paranormal Activity next to Kin, but I think this one is going to be a hell of a lot more to talk about with Army of Thieves, especially since Army of the Dead is fresh in our collective minds. So we got that coming up next week on the show, along with a few other topics, most likely. And also, don't forget our original muse, too. Clifford the Big Red Dog comes out November 10th. Just wanted to throw that out there. Anyway, that's our show tonight. I've kept these gentlemen and you way too long. This is Sleepless with Steve. We come to you live and in living color every Wednesday evening, 6:30 Central Time. Highlights will be posted right here on this YouTube channel, stevepulaski.com. You can also read my full review of Dune on stevepulaski.com if you feel obliged to do so. For Dominic Guanzon in the trademark blue polo, Joe Viso rocking out on the theater screen, and me in my See It From Space neon shirt, this has been Sleepless with Steve.